Hello and welcome to our Parent Council meeting. My name is Sarah Scott and I'm Chair of James Gillespie's High School Parent Council. Thank you for joining us this evening. Can I apologise in advance for any technical issues we might have during the meeting? For example, if you're having problems joining us or hearing us, or if one of the presenters' Wi-Fi freezes, we ask for your patience. We're using Microsoft Teams for the meeting because it's a system approved by Edinburgh Council, but it doesn't allow us to be as interactive as some other systems. The only people who can be heard are the presenters, and everyone else attending can write questions via the Q&A panel but can't be heard. I'd like to go through a few brief points before we start. We're aiming for the meeting to last about an hour, although it will run a bit longer if necessary. The meeting is being recorded and it will be put online for those who can't make it this evening. Bearing that in mind, please don't share any personal information, in particular about children, that shouldn't be shared publicly. As I've said, we can only take questions via the Q&A panel and the mics won't work for anyone other than the presenters. The questions will be published for everyone to see by our parent moderators, so if you would like your question to stay private, please say so when you type it in. Can I also ask that if you see a question on the Q&A panel which is similar to one that you want to ask, could you like that question rather than ask a repeat? That will hopefully let us get through more questions and let our presenters concentrate on the most popular ones. Can I also ask that questions and comments are expressed in an appropriately courteous way? The questions will be gathered up at the end and posted together with answers on the Parent Council website, so that even if there is not time to deal with everything tonight, they will be dealt with after the meeting. And just a note on the Q&A from the last meeting in March, just before the Easter holidays. Apologies for that not being available. What we will do is gather that and the questions from this evening's meeting all together and post it as soon as possible after this meeting. Thank you for joining us for this first meeting in the summer term. We will have one more meeting before the summer holidays on Tuesday, the 8th of June. Since our last meeting, everyone has come back to school full-time, and for those in the upper school, we are now in the middle of assessments which form the basis of the SQA's alternative certification model. The Parent Council would like to wish all the pupils involved, as well as the parents who are supporting them, and the school staff who are administering assessments, and this year also marking them, all the very best. We've also recently had elections to the Scottish Parliament, which have seen our local constituency MSP Daniel Johnson re-elected, along with his MSP colleagues across the Lothian region, who are all there to support our communities and schools. We are very grateful for the continued support we receive in raising parents' issues, which we receive from elected members from all political parties, both MSPs and in particular councillors, and we wish them all the very best in their work in the future. This evening we have with us our head teacher, Donald MacDonald, accompanied by two of his deputy head teachers, Laura Stewart, who will be giving an update on plans to deal with capacity problems at the school in 2021-22, and Ben Lewis, who will be talking about plans to make changes in the organisation of the school communities. And at the end, there will be the opportunity for questions. Before handing over to Donald for his report, I would like to give a brief update on behalf of the Parent Council. An issue which has been raised a lot over the last school year has been whether and when school-connected extracurricular activities can be resumed. Lisa Sutherland, one of our Parent Council members, has been pursuing this issue tirelessly since last autumn, and as society has been opening up, we've been looking for confirmation from the Council about plans for the resumption of activities. I think that Donald will have more to say about this in his report. But I will just say briefly that we have recently learned that there is going to be a significant change in how active schools will be run in the future, which will have an effect on extracurricular schools, as the role of active schools coordinators has changed to focus now on promoting physical activity during the school day, particularly in primary schools, and also because the Sports Scotland, the main funder for active schools, has indicated that all activities must be made available free to all children. This is clearly a laudable aim, however it does change the funding model for extracurricular activities, as coaches will not be paid by active schools, and also these activities will have to be run in another way, with the administrative burden potentially falling on parents, volunteers, or indeed the school. This is all very recent and surprising news to us as a Parent Council, and there hasn't been any consultation with parents about these changes. We are trying to find out more about it all, and in particular what support the Council and active schools will be able to offer for activities in the future. It is not clear exactly what the impact will be on James Gillespie's, but Over the next few weeks, we'll be considering issues such as funding models to pay for coaching, the role and availability of volunteers to help with clubs and coaching, and the various administrative burdens involved. But of course, we'll be working with the school on this, and perhaps again, Donald will be able to say more about this in his overview. We will let you have more information once it's available, but it is likely we will be coming back to parents with some requests for support in putting this together. And we hope to have more concrete information for the next Parent Council meeting in June. There have also been a number of meetings with the Council recently which aim to gather Parent Council feedback on the SQA's alternative certification model. I think it is fair to say that there have been concerns expressed by Parent Councils across Edinburgh about a number of issues, such as the lack of an appeals process being in place even at this late stage, the lack of a way to properly take into account exceptional circumstances, the variation in approaches to assessment between schools and between local authorities, the differing effects of COVID-related absences on different children in different schools, and the lack of a proper contingency plan for outbreaks over the next few weeks, exam security, which was in the news yesterday, and the lack of exam leave during the actual assessments. Many children, perhaps most, will cope very well with these arrangements, but the potential effect on some children's mental health in what has been a very difficult year is also a matter of concern, along with enormous pressure being put on schools and school staff. It seems that whatever the intentions were when this certification model was being set up, the fact that everyone was physically out of school for a long time after Christmas and only properly back at school after Easter seemed to have affected whatever was planned for assessments. And although all schools have slightly different approaches, the system does seem to dictate that we have an exam type system, but without all the safeguards and mitigations which we are used to. The staff at James Gillespie's have been working very hard to deal with all these challenges that this has thrown up, and we also know the Council has been pursuing these issues with the SQA. The Parent Council will be considering whether there is any need to raise any of these points directly with the SQA, both in relation to this year's assessments and with the hope that a more robust plan can be put in place for next year in case of any further disruptions occurring. If you have any views or experiences which you would like to share with the Parent Council, please email us. Can I now turn to finances? I can report that the balance of our current account is £1,461.47, which is an increase of £82.40 since our last meeting, with that coming from donations through Easy Fundraising. Easy Fundraising is one way you can support Parent Council fundraising for the school, which can be done at no cost to yourself when you are doing online shopping. Another way is via direct donation through Parent Pay, and now that we're back at school and maybe back in the Parent Pay system, please consider whether you're in a position to make such a contribution. Parent Council fundraising is principally used for our Small Sums Award, which supports small-scale projects proposed by school staff. As with last year, we are working with the James Gillespie's Trust to coordinate our financial support of the school's work. However, fundraising is significantly down this year because it has not been possible to hold the normal school events. There's more information on fundraising on the Parent Council website, jghspc.wordpress.com. And finally, I would like to take the opportunity to say goodbye and thank you to one of our long-standing Parent Council members, Sheila Shields, who will be moving on from Parent Council as her youngest child is in S6 this year. Sheila has been the refreshments coordinator for the Parent Council for many years, and with unfailing energy and efficiency has been in charge of organising refreshments for school activities, including teas and coffees at many parents' evenings and refreshments at drama performances and events such as Diversity. These have been the main source of valuable funds for the Parent Council support of the school, and for that alone we're all very grateful. However, this work is also so important in making events more sociable and enjoyable and for bringing people together, something which we have really felt over this last year when none of these events has been run. So we also have to thank Sheila for her contribution to that very real benefit as well, which has required so much hard work and organisation. Thank you, Sheila. And we will also be delivering a more tangible and possibly drinkable token of our appreciation to Sheila on behalf of the Parent Council in the near future. So thank you for listening to that summary. I'll hand over to Donald now for his report.
Thanks, Sarah, and a very good evening to everyone who's tuned in this evening. It's a lovely, well, it feels like a summer's evening. I'm sitting here. There are a number of things or areas I would like to cover tonight. Some of them were areas I would cover ordinarily because they're current and topical issues that are on my radar. But there are also matters that have been raised by parents that have come to me via Sarah. So thank you for raising these various points, and I will make mention of them. And as has been mentioned earlier, if there's something that I don't cover or don't fully answer, then there is the Q&A opportunity. And I'm joined this evening by colleagues Laura Stewart, who will talk about arrangements for overspill and the overcapacity next year, and also by Ben Lewis, who will talk about restructuring necessitated by the rising role, which means that we have to restructure houses, communities, etc., within the school. Can I begin by saying just how lovely it really is to have all the youngsters back in school after the Easter holiday? It really is. This is the first time we've had a chance to meet with the Parent Council. It really is nice, and it feels like the school is getting back to normal. Yes, we've got the various mitigations in place, mask wearing, hand washing, distancing from adults, etc. But I do want to put on record how wonderful our children have been. They have been absolutely superb. We were the first school in the UK to ask that youngsters wear face coverings in the building, and that's had various versions over the last 15 months, but it is really, really well supported. We have 23 youngsters in the school who are exempt, and you know that is respected. We respect that. So we have 23 people out of 1,500 or so, but it works really well. I'm pleased to say that we've not had an active case in the school since the beginning of November. There was one that I shared with you by email some weeks ago. It turned out to be a false positive at the time, which we discovered. So I'm really pleased with how we have addressed and responded to the various threats that COVID posed. But I'd also say that complacency could be our biggest enemy. In the coming weeks, when so much is at stake with the exams that we have for the seniors, we've got to remain vigilant. So we look to every member of the community to play their part. So we'll continue to do that. And of course, we await further announcements around mask wearing, etc., from the government in the coming weeks. But I wouldn't be surprised if mask wearing is going to be with us possibly until the end of term. But let's wait and see. So the mitigations then are working well. When I speak with staff, and now we're getting visitors into the school for various reasons, they feel very safe. Formerly, where people were quite apprehensive. So it's a really positive picture. I heard on the news this evening that we're close to 70%. I think it was across the UK in terms of adults being vaccinated, and a figure that's been shared with me that if we have 70% amongst our adult population, we then are approaching herd immunity, which gives us much cause for optimism as we move into the summer months. So returning to normal then is something that's really, really important to us. And in particular of the S1s who have joined the school, and it's been a year of considerable disruption. They as yet don't really know what high school is like. And one of the wonderful things about high school is the very wide and varied extracurricular program that we have, including foreign trips. Ordinarily, we would have had an S1 residential just before the Easter holiday. We didn't have that this year. So we're keen then to resume all of these things. There is limited capacity to go back and redo some of the things that we missed out. For example, we're not going to be able to do the S1 residential. It just isn't feasible. But there are other things, and I'll come to them in a moment. For example, an S6 prom. I've had correspondence around that. There are things that we do need to do, and I'll come to that in a moment. But there is a nice positive atmosphere around the school. The youngsters in years 1, 2 and 3 who aren't involved in exams have been really respectful and kind towards others and mindful of the need to be quiet around examination rooms. They really have been superb. And the invigilators who are in there commenting on that, how pleasantly surprised they are, because often in the media we talk about the negative side of teenager behaviour. We get very little of that at Gillespie. So kids are wonderful, and that's thanks to everybody in the school community, and especially parents, for helping us along those lines. Let me begin with SQA exams then. I'm going to call them exams. Forgive me if I don't use the word assessment. They are exams. And I'm not going to take the opportunity to criticise any one group or whatever as to where we are. We believe that the way that we are doing, gathering the evidence to allow us to allocate provisional grades for all our pupils is the correct way and the best way in our context. We wished it weren't done this way. We wished that we had more similar to last year, where it was more based on a holistic judgment rather than an evidence-based approach. But we are where we are, and we will make sure that it works. And I know that youngsters are anxious, just as our staff. I have had countless conversations with youngsters, parents, and staff who are expressing and sharing their anxieties through this period. But I want to acknowledge that, but I also want to say that we will do everything that we can to reassure people and to make this work. There are changes that we are hearing about daily. By way of example, if you'd asked me a week ago about the arrangements for exceptional circumstances, I wouldn't have known. But I can now say that if there are youngsters who, for exceptional circumstances, cannot generate the evidence that we need, for example, through being in hospital or through being ill, then there will be an extension until the beginning of September. That was information that we received in the last couple of days. I still do not have the up-to-date information for appeals, but that will come out soon. But that, I have no doubt, has come out in response to feedback from parents, schools, etc. So there will be an extension then to allow us, in exceptional circumstances, really as has always been the case, to find alternative means of providing the evidence that is needed in order to certificate all of our pupils. Quite deliberately tonight, we haven't asked Bob Shankland along to talk about SQA. Bob, as we speak, is pouring his way through the various other items of documentation that come from the SQA so that we are up to date and we are as robust as we possibly can be. And Bob will come back in June and will feedback and report then on how things have been and what our next steps are. And that will give us a bit more time. We'll tell you then when we intend to issue the provisional grades, and we'll tell you what they are prior to submitting them, around the same time as submitting them to the SQA. A few things I'll pick up on, though. A number of parents, and it's been covered in the national press, about the security of exams. It was anticipated that whichever schools were first to have the exams or the assessments, that youngsters would then put stuff on social media. It's all over social media. We know that. And there was no way really of stopping that happening. The only way of mitigating against that was to have every pupil in the country sitting the exam on the same day. Well, that just didn't happen, and it couldn't happen. So we have a situation where schools are tasked with developing their own exams, their own assessments, whilst meeting SQA criteria, and there are many, many different variations of that. It is possible that the examination that we set in maths could be the same as the examination that's set in Boroughmuir or in Portree High School or in the Nicholson or whatever. It could be, but we draw from a wide resource bank, and we have the latitude to mix up the questions and to put in different ones. We also have the latitude to put different emphasis on the responses we get to each of those answers. So I'd want to reassure you that whilst there may be security and sharing, it would be a big risk for any youngster to assume that the paper they just read on TikTok is going to be the one that they're presented with at James Gillespie's High School. It might be, but it might not be. But nevertheless, I'm confident that we will be able to allocate grades at the end of the day that will be as fair and as robust as we can possibly make them. There's a whole discussion to be had around robustness, fairness, consistency across the country, and now is not the time to develop it. We are where we are. I'm convinced that we will follow the SQA guidelines, and we'll do the level best for all pupils at James Gillespie's High School. We went down the exam model of having fewer exams rather than multiple exams. That's made the news headlines in recent days. With few exceptions, if you're sitting a particular subject at a level at James Gillespie's, you will have those exams on the one day rather than spread over several days. we felt that was better for the youngsters and would lessen anxiety and stress. It wouldn't remove it completely. We recognise that. I do think that we've found the least bad way of gathering the evidence that's required. I put SQA to one side there, and if there are other points I've not raised, and there will be, please raise it in the Q&A. I'm going to move on, and this may not be in any particular rational order, so bear with me. I want to talk a bit about the S6 leavers this year and what that will mean for them. I anticipate that S6, once they finish their last exam, I'm not really expecting them to attend classes after that, because really their courses are done. But in the event that we needed more evidence, they should remain available to come into school. So what I'd be saying is, please don't book anything exotic or too far away. Make yourself available really for the first two or 3 weeks at most in June. And that's different to previous years when you knew when your exams were finished and that was it. So not looking for you to attend classes then after your last exam is done, unless you wish to, and make yourself available should we need to do any mopping up. On the more social side with S6, I think it would be a great shame if we didn't offer some version of the leavers dance, or the prom as it's tended to be called this side of the pond in recent years. It is our intention to do that, and my colleague Ben Lewis will be working with the prom committee, and it's our current thinking that we will run an event towards the end of August or the very beginning of September. I can confirm that we are already contacting hotels to find a suitable venue, and it will run, I hope, and I've determined that it will, along similar lines to previous years, where we would have a champagne reception in the Greyfriars Kirk. The reason we have it in Greyfriars Kirk is not for religious reasons, but it's a big enough venue to hold 800 to 900 people, because parents and sometimes grandparents are invited along to mark this milestone in an S6 student's education. There is then, it's a short service with some speeches. We have certification, leaving certificate for pupils, a champagne reception, and then they are piped off to a local plush hotel in all their finery. We think it's important that we mark this, and especially so for the S6, given the year that they've had. I'm hoping also, as in previous years, that the Trust will arrange for a drinks reception for all parents in the city chambers. So these are ideas. I'm hoping that they will all come to fruition, but we were really just discussing these this afternoon in anticipation of tonight's meeting and sharing with you where we're at. We do hope and will want to have the S6 pupils coming into school. Currently, we can't have 200 coming in at once. So I envisage having them in groups of 50, where there'll be the opportunity to reminisce, to meet with some of their teachers, a few of the routine, possibly boring speeches, and I'll apologise in advance for my contribution to that, and really a way to formalise the finishing of school. And then we will invite them to go and have a barbecue in the meadows, and to be sensible and to do what teenagers should be doing at this time of year. That's the plan, and we provisionally, I would suggest, we'll be doing that on Friday the 11th of June. We'll send information out around this in the next few days. I'm not expecting that there will be a one size fits Edinburgh, so I'm saying that's what we're going to be doing at Gillespie's, and I hope it meets with support. If there are other suggestions and ideas of doing something different, perhaps if we can do it, we'll aim to do it, because I think we really do owe it to this year's S6 to see them off with a degree of respect and dignity to mark their contribution to the school. S1 Parents' Evening, the difficulties we've had. Thank you to the parents who have communicated with us and let us know that they weren't able to make as many appointments as they would like to have had. I wrote to all parents yesterday. I hope you received that letter. I would want to state that this is not anything new. I've been in teaching almost 40 years, and every one of those years, there are evenings when there's greater demand for appointments than there are spaces available. That issue is more acute at Gillespie's, where we have large classes, and we have a large number of subjects in S1 and S2 in particular. We have fewer subjects in S3, S4, and then S5, S6 is less acute then, but it can arise. What we will do to help in this case is we will enable staff where you haven't been able to get an appointment to phone you. Meeting with us, meeting with you isn't still possible, I don't think. So we'll aim to call you in the coming weeks. And we'll aim to do that. We've done that in recent years. This year there are particular challenges around that because staff are focused on exams and marking and moderation, etc., so that we may have less flexibility. But I'm determined that we will aim to do that so that we can feed back to parents and you get that opportunity. I would advise that don't try and meet with all your child's teachers. It isn't necessary, and it would really overload the system. We'd suggested a maximum of 6 appointments. And as I put in my letter, parents were able to make 6 appointments on the Tuesday evening and 6 appointments on the Thursday evening. And thank you to those parents who have come back and said that on realizing that they've actually cancelled some of these appointments. So to parents who haven't been able to make as many appointments as they'd like, go back and have a look, and there may now be openings that have opened up. So hopefully that will reduce some of that anxiety. I would want to acknowledge that this year, of all years, I can understand parents being anxious to meet with teachers because we are a high attaining school, and of course you want to engage in finding what's going on, and you want to do the best for your youngster. The best way of doing that is engaging with the school. And I do feel frustration that we can't engage with you all with more time and more meaningfully, but quite simply the numbers don't stack up. We will endeavour to meet the requests that come our way. Moving on, if I may, to extracurricular activities, and as Sarah mentioned in her opening piece, there are moves afoot to change the way in which these are delivered in schools. And the council, quite rightly, is looking at how it can refocus and retarget its efforts in areas of the city where there is less affluence, less opportunity for youngsters. And what we will now do as a school is we'll work with parents to look at how we can ensure that our programme continues, but also to ensure that youngsters in our school community who perhaps for whom there are barriers to accessing sports and extracurricular, that we will ensure that they can access it in the way that they have in the past. By way of example, whilst we did have charges for pupils accessing the sports clubs, that's what enabled us to have a wide range of extracurricular. We offered free or discounted access to pupils, for example, on free school meals. I am committed to continuing with that, and we need to look after youngsters. It's not necessarily down to youngsters who are in free school meals. There are other families who necessarily can't afford some of the more expensive activities on offer. We are committed to ensuring that all families can access our sports activities, our music provision, our foreign trips. And to that end, we will have to have further fundraising. We'll be turning to the James Gillespie Trust and a variety of other charities that we have tapped into over the years. So every youngster should be taking part in all of these things. There should be no barriers. And I'm absolutely determined that we will have that in line with government and council priorities. And in the next few weeks, I spoke earlier with Lisa Sutherland tonight. I want to go and recommend my thanks to her for her support in ensuring that this does not drop off the agenda. I'll be inviting Sarah and any other parents who wish to join us to form a short life working group to ensure that we have got the processes in place to ensure that we can restart our full programme from September this year. And I'm determined that we will do that. Moving on from there, if I may, there was a query about Young Scot card. If there are any youngsters out there who did not get their Young Scot card, please drop an email for the attention of Mr. Lewis, and he will follow that up and ensure that a Young Scot card is obtained for you and issued. This year, it's a busy time of year, and although, yes, we're occupied with SQA and we're occupied with COVID-related stuff, the usual business of preparing for change of timetable is happening. I'm heavily involved in interviewing for staff. We will have around 8 new appointments, starting with us in August. And I'm pleased to say that we have received in excess of 250, 300 applications in the last 2 weeks for the various posts. So we are very busy reading those, interviewing, etc. And I'm pleased to say that Gillespie's continues to attract a high number of high quality candidates. And I'll say something more about that in my Friday update about who we've appointed, etc. We're interviewing again tomorrow evening, for example, for a psychology post as a result of rising roles and huge popularity in psychology, which is something we added to our curriculum some 4 or 5 years ago. So staffing then continues to grow. We will be fully staffed. I anticipate we will be from August. There are the odd absences we will have. That's such as human nature, but we will ensure that we are ready to go from August, and I anticipate being fully staffed. I anticipate changing timetable on the 14th of June. That's our plan. We will change timetable on the 14th of June, so we have a run at it for the last 2 weeks. It's essential that we do that so that when the 16th or the 16th of August is when the staff start back, people start back on the 18th, we will have around 325 new S1s who have never set foot on the campus. We will need to have all our other pupils on board, helping them reorientate and allaying their anxiety. So it's important that years 2 to 6 are familiar with their timetable so that they can help us with the 320 odd new pupils in August. It would be rather challenging, if not impossible, to have 1,580 pupils who have never had a timetable all starting on the same morning. I think it would be impossible to do that safely and efficiently. P7 transition, we are currently involved in transitioning, supporting youngsters who need a wee bit of extra TLC as they move from P7. Some of you who have got will have children in P7 who are transitioning this year. There will not be a 3-day visit this year as in previous years. It will be virtual. And my colleague Ben Lewis, amongst many other things that Ben Lewis does, is busy setting that up, building on previous practices and what we've done. Conscious that I've spoken for quite a while there, I have no doubt there may be other areas people want to ask me about. I will pick these up on the Q&A section. And for the life of me, Sarah, I can't remember who was to follow me, but if I can invite whoever that was to do that. Thank you.
I think we'd agreed that Laura Stewart would follow you, if that's okay with Laura.
Yeah, it is. Okay, good evening, everybody. I've got a presentation which I am going to share, hopefully, and I'll give an update on where we are with capacity planning for this year. Okay. Could somebody let me know if that is appearing?
It's all good, Laura.
Yes, it is.
Oh, good. Thank you. Okay. So there's been a lot happening this year to plan for our increasing school role following the information that Derek was going to be delayed. And so far we've been putting all the information as it comes in and as we progress on the school website. A summary of where we're currently at is that we had Derek as a £10 million refurbishment to give us extra accommodation that we required. It was delayed due to COVID, and it's on track for its new completion date of spring 2022. Obviously, we need accommodation in August, and so we're now planning for use of the ground floor of the Children First building, which is really close. Obviously, it's basically on site with a wall around it, and it will give us the additional capacity that we need for next year. In addition, it's hoped that community benefit money from the refurbishment project at Derek will help to improve some of our outdoor spaces at Gillespie's as well. In preparation and planning for this, we have a staff, a parent carer and an S5 student working group who have been supporting the school to look at how best to manage our capacity pressures. Each of those 3 working groups has raised the things that they think will be the biggest challenges, and the school and the council have been able to address those, and lots of resources have been provided to help support us. We also have are awaiting the timetable to be drafted for next year, which Mr. Warden's working incredibly hard on at present. And once we have this draft, we'll be able to analyse it, because we know that there will be points where there are classrooms which we can timetable into for things, and at other points there will be non-classroom spaces on site which we can use for study times, and we're looking at how better to use them at breaks and lunches. For that second point, with the student working group, for example, during COVID, for health and safety reasons, we've split the school up into various areas for different year groups, and the response has been really positive to that. So we're looking at still having potential areas for different year groups for breakout areas. And then also obviously the additional accommodation of the Children First building for the S6 students, who will be doing a mix of advanced hires and hires. And from previous meetings and information shared, some of those advanced hires will have a maximum of 2 periods of flexible directed learning, and the additional accommodation will be used to support that. This additional accommodation has got spaces of various different sizes. And so we'll be looking at how best to utilise those spaces. Some of them, for example, are large enough during FDL time to be used potentially as an additional classroom space if the subject requirements would find that useful. We also have tutorial work and targeted sports sessions that we could use some of the smaller spaces, or spaces that would have a capacity for about 20 students. And there's also the teacher-directed study. So various areas will be used for certain subjects during FDL time, and other areas will be used for certain S6 students to do self-study, which is the last point there, that we will actually have capacity to provide study spaces for S6 students who are not currently in FDL time during those periods, which is a luxury we've not had in the past. A digital update. I saw a couple of questions linking to this as well. We have staff devices, iPads, which have been distributed out to all staff already. We've had some staff training taking place, and that will be branched out over the next term and onwards throughout next year. We have S4 and S5 devices being processed. Just this week, we shared some device agreements with students via their team pages, and this has also been emailed out to parents and carers. S4 and S5 students have been prioritised for phase 1, so that we can provide training and use the iPads to really enhance the teaching and learning across all of the senior phase subjects, hires and advanced hires, and for those doing National 5s or NPAs. Devices for the other year groups will be coming out in phase 2, which will be after the summer, and there will be in-school training and council provided training for use of the iPads throughout next year and on from there. There is a system update that the iPads that are issued in phase 1 will have to be given in September, but lots more information will follow on that. And Mr. Warden had emailed out about a short life working group in the Friday update, and I added this also to the information I sent out today, which was that if you were interested in forming a parent partnership about this initiative, then you can just contact him via email by the 31st of May. We have a number of staff on the working group who are leading various elements of this. Mr. Alexander, for example, is looking at the tracking and monitoring of the senior school engagement within their subjects. So it's not just for advanced higher courses in FDL, but for all of those students and their subjects. And so far, some of the key points they've come up with is early identification and intervention measures, looking for barriers and addressing them, and encouraging students back on track with targeted support, and obviously parental communication's key at a fast and prompt stage. He will be continuing work with that this term, and will come and hopefully present to Parent Council with where he gets with that. Miss McLennan is also looking at collating information which will come from all the teachers who will be delivering advanced higher courses and using flexible directed learning time as part of that. She's going to collate how the time will be used, ensure all the resources will be in place to support the courses, and ensure that there's quality assurance built in at key points so that when something's working really well, the good practice can be shared throughout, and if anything needs extra resourcing or more support, then that will be put in fast. And again, this will be communicated with parents as the year goes on. The feedback from the working groups, the staff, the student and the parent carer working groups are built into each of these things as they're moved forward. As I say, they'd like to come and share their progress with parents and seek your feedback. So that will be something which will be coming in the future. And we'll keep you informed as things further develop, again, by adding the information to the website and emailing you out and sharing information with students via the Teams pages as well. And I will come out of the slideshow now and close that down and stop sharing my screen. In fact, have I stopped sharing my screen already? I have. Great. And the last bit of information for you was just to say that in June, there is going to be a council visit to the school, which will be looking at the Wi-Fi systems that are in place and ensuring that everything is set up in preparation for this one-to-one device being rolled out across all year groups. And that is all the information that I have for you just now. So I will say a thank you there and pass back to Ben, I think is next.
Yes, thank you, Laura, and hopefully I'll have the same level of success that you did in sharing your screen. So, good evening, everyone, and just bear with me while I hopefully get this working, and then I'm going to ask, once I've done so, one of my colleagues to let me know if they can see the splash piece. Laura, you're the only one I can see. Can you see that?
Yeah, it's up. It's fine.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to talk briefly about our pupil support restructure that will be happening from August 2021. So, Donald already kind of briefed you a little bit on why this is happening. It is linked to rising roles, but just to give you a little bit more detail, pupil support leaders, our sort of frontline guidance team, have a maximum allowed caseload of 300. And from session 21-22, our school rule rises beyond 1,500, and that means, if you're doing the maths that I love, we therefore go from 5 full-time equivalent to 6 full-time equivalent PSLs. One of the things one of the challenges, one of the interesting things about the challenges of rising rules is it also presents us with opportunities. So it gave us an opportunity to review and improve on our existing structure that's been in place for several years. So let's now look at what the aims of the restructure were. First and foremost, it was to minimise disruption to the existing relationships between our PSLs and the pupils and families. Second, there are several different structures that you can have for pupil support, and we wanted to maintain the strengths of our current system while benefiting from the strengths of other models. Third, we wanted to create a model that could manage the transitions related to our changing role. That will include the period of growth that we're currently in, and also the transition of GME to their own campus as and when that happens. And finally, we wanted to make sure we managed our estate, which is mainly Brunsfield House, to accommodate the additional staffing. So, what actions did we take? We conducted a thorough and rigorous review of our current and previous structures that we've had at James Gillespie's High School. And as we start to narrow down suitable models, we then worked with other schools who had similar models to identify what worked well for them, but we also asked them what they would improve if they were themselves going through a restructure. We also conducted a review with our Essex Pupil Voice, as they are the only year group to experience both our current and previous structure, and actually also experience a transition between them. So, the best model that we identified that would work for us in our context and all the aims that I laid out, particularly maintaining as much of the current relationships as we have as possible, is a 3-community model. Now, these 3 communities will be made from our 5 existing communities, and you can see that hopefully how that's working here. And if you notice at the bottom for spy law, the new spy law community will be made up of the current spy law community and transfers. This model minimizes the number of transfers, but no matter what model we had, there were going to be transfers. So, and the good thing about this one, as I say, is it minimizes those. So now let's look at the staffing. So what we have is in our 3 communities, each community has a community head, which is a deputy. Now, this is a change from our current model of year heads. James Gillespie's did previously have a community head model, as do many other schools currently. Because of the benefits over year heads, one of the major benefits is that, well, by the definition of a year head, what happens is that each time a pupil moves a year, quite often they're changing that link deputy, whereas with a community head, they'll be maintaining the same link with deputy all the way through. Each community will have 2 PSLs, full-time equivalent, although, for example, if you look at Lauder, that is a job share, but it's the equivalent of 2 full-time equivalent PSLs. But your child will still have 1 link PSL. So, for example, if you look at Roslyn, if you were in a register class that has R1 to R3, so for example, 2R1 to 2R3, Mr. McPhail will still be your link. If you have, apologies for the little glitch there, if you're in R4 to R6, you would have Miss Pierce. There will also be a link support for learning teacher, and that is currently being kind of worked on just now, which is why it's to be confirmed, but that will be in place soon. And then the thing that popped in before and has now come up again, we also have support that exists across all 3 communities. That is a deputy head teacher for people to support. That will be Mr. Porter. He's returning to us on the 25th of May, and so therefore will be in place for the support structure in August. And we also have our support for learning leader, Mr. Cockcroft, who again will support all 3 communities. Now, the 3 communities here, in each of these tables, we have the new classes. The reason it jumps from, for example, 1L1 to 2L1 is that this will be they'll be in 2nd year in August. These are the new classes, class codes, register codes, and what we have here is the existing ones on the right of each table. And what you'll notice is in spy law, as mentioned before, this is where we'll be having a new 6th PSL, and then transfers minimized, but from other sort of current houses, to make sure that there's equity of size and caseload. There'll be a robust handover between the current PSLs to any new PSLs in terms of those caseloads. Now, there's no need to worry about trying to quickly check through this and see where your kid's going or anything like that. This will all be sent out, so there's no need to kind of make sure you've got that information just now, shouting at your kid to find out which register class that they're in to make that link. Don't worry, you will get all this information sent out to you. And that is it from me. Hopefully that was a bit of a whistle stop tour, but I'm conscious of time. So this presentation will, as I say, go out as pupils will be informed, will be emailed tomorrow. Thank you very much. And I'm going to pass back now to Donald.
I'm here, yeah. What I'd like to do, Sarah, if that's okay, as previous occasions, is I'll go through the Q&A and start responding to some of the questions there, with the caveat that we will respond to all the questions. There are, I notice, 75 of them, so clearly in the next, I'm happy to stay for another 15, 20 minutes is fine. To respond to what I'd like to do, if I begin with the questions that have more than 15 likes. Does that sound okay, Sarah?
Yes, please do that, and then we can maybe work through the other ones as well. I mean,
yep.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Or if there is one that you've picked up that is a burning issue. I had a quick scan through as colleagues were presenting there, and a lot of them are to do with SQA. So I'll pick these up when there's some things I could have said earlier that might have allayed people's fears and anxieties. And I'm also aware that some people have joined the meeting perhaps after I've spoken. No, that's okay. That's the benefit of being online. People can dip in and out as suits and according to commitments that people have. So how will my child's exam be marked fairly when the paper has been leaked to the other schools before they take the test? That is a challenge for us, without a doubt. I'll be surprised, though it could happen, that another school has got exactly the same bundle of questions as we're using. There may be overlap, but that is for us to manage. We will mark according to SQA criteria, and they are consistent across the country. What I do want to say, and I noticed there's quite a few comments about the maths papers being very difficult. My own daughter commented the same. What we do have as a school is we have control over where we allocate the grade boundaries. So, for example, and this is common practice in school prelims, for example, and also when it is the exam, the SQA set in the exams, where an exam is more difficult one year, it may well be that the pass is reduced. It would be reduced. It was 1 year, some years ago, that in order to achieve a pass in higher maths, I think it was 32%. That happens. I can also say that there is no earthly way that we could expect our pupils to reach the normal examination standard given the disruption of the last year. There is no earthly way we could expect that. We therefore have to adjust boundaries accordingly. So let me reassure you of that. We are using, some cases, questions from past exam papers. In some cases, we may use the 2020 paper, the paper that was written but never sat. We may use parts of that, parts of the course that were covered. But we cannot expect youngsters, in languages also that's come up, to be at the same level as before. What we then have to do is to make adjustment to allow for that. And we will make those adjustments when we see how youngsters have performed overall. I'm expecting as a head teacher that our overall pattern of attainment will be similar to previous years. We're a high attaining school. And I would expect it to be similar this year. So we will be looking at the grade boundaries. So if a paper was difficult, we will adjust accordingly. Let me continue down. Keeping going, perhaps I said that's over 15. Sorry, I'm going to go back. What is the point of practicing SQA past papers? My child got A's when the exam by the school was much harder. My child found the maths exam incredibly difficult. I've heard that being said. As I just mentioned, then we may unwittingly have given slightly different or more difficult questions than in previous years. That happens. There is an element of teacher judgment as to which questions to put into the paper. Some years may be harder. The danger to that, of course, is that youngsters who are prone to being anxious may affect their performance more adversely. Equally would be criticised if the paper was too difficult, too many people then scoring top marks and high marks. Ideally, if there was a way of doing it, we'd want to have an average level of difficulty over the last 5-10 years. And that takes a lot of time and effort, and realistically, and collaboration across lots of schools. So there'll be challenges around that, as you can imagine. Continuing down, if I may, so I'm looking at 15 or more likes. So a parent commenting then concerned about the different range of approaches by high schools, the lack of options for our pupils, no evidence to fall back on, and the disappointing range of support from departments from good to very poor. There is variation across schools, there is variation across departments. We'd want every department to be excellent and doing that. I acknowledge there is variation. There's variation across schools. Parents have also asked that some schools are getting youngsters to sit several assessments, and there's talk about then averaging or taking the best of those assessments. I've heard that but for me that would be questionable in terms of the SQA criteria, and that's the only comment I would make. That if you're giving them the several papers and choosing the best of them, I think that would become questionable and may not bear scrutiny. So yeah, it's not a practice that we would want to follow. There are variations across high schools. Some high schools started the examination or their assessment, if you want to call it that, the assessment straight after the Easter holiday. They did have them spaced over the 4 weeks. We didn't do that. We felt that it was better to have the first 2 weeks to focus on more learning and teaching and past papers. So at Gillespie's, as you'll know, we had no more than a quarter of the senior kids in the 3 weeks before the Easter holiday. Some schools had more of the seniors in before the Easter holiday because they had more room or because they're smaller classes. So therefore, there are variations in how we've done this. So comparisons across the schools, whilst interesting, they don't really help me make decisions as to how best to do it for Gillespie's. Continuing, so thank you for planning an S6 event. We know that's important to the S, but it may be less important to pupils further down the school. And again, a few notes of thanks. I'll pick up the point on no residential weekend for the new S1s, but in light of their below par intro to high school, hybrid days, outdoor activities. I'll follow that up. I will find out if our outdoor education staff could help in delivering such. Yeah, let me explore that. I can see challenges with it, but I do like to see the glass as half full. So I'll take that away and see what can be done. And we'll see what can be done there. We do have outdoor staff who work for the authority, so let's have a look at that. I think that would be great if we can do that. Yeah, and again, a further comment about different approaches to assessments or exams. My child in S5 in the past 2 years has been massively affected both academically and mentally. And some schools are allowing retakes. My understanding of the SQA criteria is that would not be permissible. So good luck to the schools who are doing that, and the work that will be involved in having to reassess according to SQA criteria would be my reaction. But I'm not going to comment on any individual schools, but we will do it as robustly as we can. And I comment that Bob Shankland is one of the most robust and meticulous people I've ever worked with. So we will follow the criteria and what we're asked to do very, very carefully. Question then about textbooks, and that's related to also to iPads. And there are a few questions, because we did write to parents today about the release of iPads, and I didn't say much about the release of iPads today. It's an authority decision to provide all pupils in the council from P6 through to S6, that's the current S5, with iPads for the coming academic session. They had to do something to address the issues that arose through the lockdown pandemics, where a sizable number of youngsters did not have access to suitable IT. So a decision was taken at council level to provide iPads to all pupils. Now, we are tasked then with managing that. My colleague Laura Stewart provided documentation around how that's going to operate for us. I'm sure there'll be questions around that, but I don't propose to go into that this evening. Instead, we will follow up, because that really went out today. So what I'd want to do is to collate some of the feedback that we're getting, and more then collate collectively to these, so we can do it in a more structured way. But that is the rationale, the logic towards having iPads, and I appreciate that's not universally popular with everyone. Again, a question about some in other schools, several exams being issued to pupils. I've commented on that, and praise for Mr. Shankland. Thank you for that. Variation across high schools, and thanks for hardworking staff, etc. There's a comment from a parent of an S1 pupil, and still can't understand why our children don't have textbooks. They have no point of reference to go back to at home, and I can't see how they would ever be able to revise anything. Ben, I'm going to take a wee bit of a break. I know that Ben, prior to taking up this position, was heavily involved in developing our maths curriculum. And I'm going to put you on the spot a wee bit, Ben, because maths is one of the areas where there are textbooks available, and there are pros and cons for textbooks. Can I ask you, Ben, to respond to that and just say a wee bit about the pros and cons of textbook, and perhaps from your perception, as I know since coming into maths, we have seen attainment rise sharply. What are your thoughts, Ben?
Yeah, no, I can definitely see from the parent's perspective that having one textbook and a curriculum designed around that one textbook would be highly beneficial, because they can, the textbook can come home and they can go, right, well, today's page 1 and tomorrow's page 2, and I definitely see the value in that. One of the challenges that we found is that there isn't 1 or 2 or even 3 or 4 textbooks that we could identify as being, well, if you buy these 3 or 4, you're going to cover everything exactly the way that we would want. And therefore, what we found was, if you design courses around one textbook, it tends to lead to quite flat attainment, because you don't have room to grow. You don't have room to bring in new advancements in kind of different sort of styles of curriculum delivery. So I'm not talking about pedagogy, but actually curriculum development. So I know that doesn't solve the problem that some parents are finding about supporting a young person, but there just simply wasn't. We looked at Scottish textbooks, English textbooks, all kinds of other ones to try and identify one that we thought would fit, but ultimately we found there just wasn't one. And as Donald said, we have been able to raise attainment consistently over several years in maths. However, I'm aware that of the downsides of that, and apologies for that. But we felt the benefit of the raising of attainment outweighed the challenges that is caused by not having a textbook.
Thanks, Ben. And Laura Stewart, I know you come at this from a science point of view. Anything on that point, Laura?
Just to reiterate what Ben said, in science we developed courses to best prepare students for their S3 to S6 courses. So in S1 and S2 we wrote them specifically to lead them up and prepare them. And none of the textbooks cover the courses the way that they're designed, and each school has designed a S1 to S2 or S3 in some schools courses, all in different ways for science. So again, we put course textbooks on the website that are useful, but they certainly wouldn't teach the course effectively on their own. I know that in many subjects what people have done is they've created summary notes that cover their topics in a neat and concise way specifically to our curriculum, and those are uploaded on things like Teams and SharePoint, which then obviously would be accessible through an iPad if the systems were all the same and consistent, which I know is not the same as a textbook, but it's like an online textbook, and that's a better way to help pupils work up through all the courses with a bit of consistency and progression.
Thanks, Laura. Just to finish that off, I think there is a further discussion to be had around textbooks. From the questions that parents are raising, I think we need to revisit that. There's talk about iPads, as Laura has mentioned, and accessing materials online. But we have learned over the last year that online learning is useful, but it's not as effective and not as good as face-to-face teaching. We also know that, and I know, I've got kids of my own, a daughter now at her university, that given the choice, that she prefers a textbook. So I want to revisit this. It's not straightforward. It's helpful that maths and biology were represented here in a sense. Modern studies is an extreme example where there is no modern studies textbook that is up to date. I mean, there's no modern studies textbook that will cover Donald Trump's era in power, or what's currently happening with Brexit and so on and so forth. That's a kind of extreme example. But suffice to say that I do want to revisit it, and this is where I think pupil voice and speaking to the youngsters themselves, they know they're dealing with the fallout from a pandemic and how best to learn. We need to go back and ask the pupils, and then have a really good discussion with parents as to where we go next as a school. We shouldn't be going necessarily down an electronic route. It's helpful to have them. It's helpful to have them, but it shouldn't be one size fits all. So let's note then that we return to that and have that discussion through parent council and other means in the coming months. I think that's going to be really important. I have a couple of questions asking about whether or not pupils can resit an examination. Well, my understanding of that is no. There is no sit. If you fail the exam, you can then go and resit it. Again, if there were exceptional circumstances, if someone was sitting a paper and they became medically unwell and had to leave, then they would be resitting a paper, but not necessarily the same one. That would be the practice during normal SQA, or we would have recourse to a prelim mark or whatever, and the full detail of what exceptionality means. But I'm really quite clear that resitting a paper repeatedly to try and up your marks, if that's being reported as happening in schools, would be would not be the practice that that would identify with SQA criteria. And Sarah, I'm guided by you, and while Sarah is looking it up, there's a last question, anonymous. Are pupils allowed to have beards? Thank you for whoever raised that. It does bring a smile to my face. Yes, if they wish to have a beard, we do not discriminate, James Gillespie. We do genuinely value diversity, and if they wish to have a beard, then I have absolutely no objection, and we have over the years, we have had pupils sporting quite magnificent beards and sometimes being mistaken for being staff, much to the amusement on occasion of visitors. So we are somewhat liberal in our outlook on such matters. We do have a dress code which we turn to on occasion, but our kids are great. It tends to be the warmer weather where some of our pupils sometimes forget that they're not going to the beach, they're actually coming to our school, and that's dealt with discreetly. But the colour of people's hair, or whether they have hair or not, is entirely a personal matter, and we do not think it matters a jot as to how it will impact on their health and well-being as teenagers, or their capability or their ability to learn. Sarah, is there anything you'd like me to go back and pick up on?
There were there's a question about instrumental tuition for those in S1 who haven't had a chance to take up a new instrument as would normally happen, and also about the availability of lockers. Somebody who's been unsuccessful in getting a locker for an S1, whether that's just an individual issue or who they should contact about that. Okay, for the music tuition, if Deirdre O'Brien was here, I would defer to her. She knows that inside out. I also acknowledge that this past 15 months has been completely different. And rather than say this is the rule and this is what we're doing, I could ask that parent or those parents to write for my attention. I will then ensure that that is responded to in a way. And where possible, we will try and offer tuition where we can. But there are criteria that govern when we're managing a limited resource, which it is, our music staff and our music instructors. So please write to me, and if we can do that, we will. In regard to lockers, again, please write to me. We don't have a locker for every single pupil in the school. We do have around 600 or 700 lockers available. And it's been our experience in recent years that not all of these are taken up by pupils. So there should be capacity. So again, please direct that to me, and I'll ensure that it's relayed to the member of staff who oversees lockers. And if there isn't a locker available, we can look at finding some way of supporting that youngster. If it's about carrying too many books or leaving a musical instrument or whatever it might be, we will work to find a solution. But especially as we're soon to change timetable with S6 leaving,
there'd be a case for prioritising that youngster who hasn't had a locker this year. Anything else, Sarah?
Just going back, thank you very much for that, Donald. Just going back to the instrumental tuition question, is it not normally the case that an S1, a range of instrument places are offered generally to the S1s, but this will not have happened this year? Will that be carried on to S2, or will they have missed the opportunity?
Because I'm not entirely sure, and when I'm not entirely sure, I'm better off saying, I'll be honest, I don't know. So I will be deferring to Mrs. O'Brien, and she will work with the music department to get a response to that. So rather than give the wrong information tonight, I will admit that I don't know, but I do know who to ask, and I'll do that tomorrow if that parent contacts me.
And there was just one further thing I was going to check. One question was, with the digital devices being passed out to children, will children still be able to use their own devices to connect to Wi-Fi, which is an agreement we came to with Gillespie's, between Gillespie's and the council recently? I see Laura is nodding her head there.
If Laura, you could come in at that point.
As far as I know at present, the Wi-Fi will be accessible as it currently is, and that will continue. However, it is something I'll have to ensure does continue, because I know that on the iPads they log in via their school account, and on their own devices they can log in a number of different ways. So I'll double check, but I certainly haven't heard that it's being taken away.
Thanks very much.
Can I also add to that? There was a question in the Q&A from a parent whose child, I think it was a daughter, who had come into school, let's say it was S4, I can't remember what was in the question, was relying on the school Wi-Fi in order to do revision. And the school Wi-Fi, for whatever reason, wasn't accessible, so that pupil wasn't able to do revision. I'm embarrassed and I'm sorry about that. If that situation arises, can I ask for the parent or the youngster to contact me? And with the parent's agreement, there is no reason why that child could not go home to study if the parent is agreeable to it. The key thing is that every youngster has the opportunity to revise for the exams that are coming up. Now, if that means if we can't provide a suitable space in school, then the common sense things to do is to liaise with you as a parent, and that youngster goes home to revise. It's not exam leave as such, it is us working with you to provide the best opportunities for the youngster to prepare for the exams. So please let me know if that or any other issue is arising with working in school. We'll do whatever we can do to reduce anxiety for our pupils.
Well, thank you, Donald, and thank you, Laura and Ben. That seems like a good moment to wrap things up for this evening. Thank you to everybody for joining us this evening, to Laura, Ben and Donald for their updates, for answering our questions, and we are, as always, very grateful for the opportunity to hear from the school about what is happening in these important areas which we know are of concern to so many pupils and parents. Our next Parent Council will take place, as I mentioned earlier, on 8th of June, and we hope that you can join us then. And just now, good night to everybody. Thank you.